Assalamualaikum everyone. This is Dr. Shahid Khokar, and today we will talk about the lecture 9, and this lecture belongs to the appendix of chapter 1, and in this appendix we are talking about the decision making models, and in those decision making models we have discussed break even analysis and we have discussed decision theory. So, under the using of decision theory, there are different scenarios that in which we can apply the decision theory. So, first scenario could be once you are making the decision under certainty. It means that you are sure, 100% sure that what would be the outcome or the payoff of each event, and based on that payoffs we will make a decision while applying the steps which we have discussed in our previous lecture. So we will try to understand this concept with the help of an example. And as you can see in your slides, there is an example where a manager is deciding whether to build a small or a large facility. Much depends on the future demand that the facility must serve, and demand may be small or large. The manager knows with certainty the payoffs that will result under each alternative, showing in the following payoff table. Here, if you try to summarize it in a simple words, first we should know what is mean by the facility. As I explained to you earlier, facility could be a production facility where you are producing the products, or it could be a warehousing facility or a space where you store the raw materials or a finished goods. It could be any. So here he is talking about a manager has to decide whether he should go for a small facility or for a large facility. And he's saying in this scenario, the manager knows with certainty the payoffs that will result under each alternative, और उस payoffs को उसने represent किया है with the help of the exam table. In the next slide we will see the table, and then the another important point he is talking about, okay, the payoffs are represented in $1,000, but simultaneously he is showing the present value of the future revenues minus cost for each alternative in each event. As we have discussed in our previous lecture, that while applying the decision theory, we should calculate the payoffs at the present value and present value of the future revenues. So here that's what he is talking about. Okay, they have calculated the payoffs by calculating the present value of the future revenues minus the costs for each alternative which you have to face or which you have to bear. So in the next table we will see what are the different payoffs under the different alternatives. As you can see in your slide, there is a payoff table, and it is clearly mentioned that this payoff table is showing the values in $1,000, and on the left side in the first column there he is talking about the different alternatives. First alternative is you are going to build a small facility. The second alternative is that you are going to build a large facility. And third alternative would be that you are not doing anything. You are just letting the things going as the things are right now. After these alternatives, on the next column, he has mentioned the possible future demand. And if you talk about the possible future demand, he has given you two events. First one, that if the demand would be low, then what will be the value of the payoffs? And if demand is high, then what would be the value of the payoffs? As you can see in the second column, with small facility, the payoff would be $200,000 if demand is low. But at the same time, your payoff would be $270,000 if demand is high and you are building a small facility. The next alternative is the large facility, where you can see that your payoff would be $160,000 if a company has low demand, and if company has high demand, the payoff would be $800,000. In the last column, he is talking about a third alternative, which is do nothing. In that scenario, he is saying that since you are not making any investment, or since you are not making any cost, so there will be no payoff. So in both the scenarios, either the demand would be low or the demand would be high. If you are doing nothing, so your payoff would also be nothing, and it is represented with the help of 0. So that was the payoff table. In the next slide, we will see how the manager makes decision in this scenario. As you can see in the slide, if the manager knows that the future demand will be low, the company should build a small facility and enjoy a payoff $200,000. Whereas the payoff of the large facility is 160,000. So we can say, if you talk about the decision points, if the management really knows about the future demand, it would build the small facility if the demand will be low, or it will build the large facility if the demand would be higher. So with the help of this example, we have seen how a manager can take decisions when they are 100% sure that the demand in future will be low or it would be high. Moving on, he is talking about decision making under uncertainty. In the previous scenario, we have taken the decisions when Manager is 100% sure about the future, and in this scenario we will talk about when manager has no certainty and he is dealing with the uncertain situation. So here he is talking about if manager is not sure about the future and he is dealing with the uncertainty, he can take decision in the four possible ways. First one is called the maximin, और in simple terms हम लोग इसको बोल सकते हैं best of the worst. इस सिनेरियो में if a manager is a pessimist or having a pessimistic approach, then he will create all the worst scenarios and he will choose the best of the worst scenario. Another situation where a operation manager is optimistic, he will create different scenarios and for all the scenarios he will choose the best scenario if the manager is optimistic or if he is taking a optimistic approach about the decision. The third one is called the Laplace, or in simple terms we can say the best of weighted payoff. In this approach, manager is acting as a realist and he believes that all the future events have equal probability of happening. So in that case, he will make the probability of every future event equally, and based on that probability he will choose the best payoff, and that payoff would be called as the best weighted payoff. Moving on, we will talk about the minimax regret or the worst regret. In worst regret, the manager makes the decision in such a way where he wants to reduce the regret after taking the decision. So, in that scenario, he is actually a personality who is having a nostalgia, so he wants to see that after making decision either his regret is more or either his regret is low. Moving on, he's talking about decision making under risk. That is another scenario under the topic of decision making theory. And in this scenario, the author is saying we assume that the manager can list the events and estimate their probabilities. It means the manager knows what are the possible events in future it will happen and what are the chances that those events will happen. The next thing he is talking about is the manager has less information than with the decision making under uncertainty. It means the manager has some information, but he is not very much sure about all the events and their probabilities. But manager has more information when he is taking decision under the uncertainty. So in this case, it is a in between case of the decision making under the certainty situation and decision making under the uncertainty situation. So as you can see, he is also talking about the expected value decision. So what does it mean by the expected value decision? Here you should know that this method is related with the Laplace method, which we have talked about in the previous slide. In the Laplace, you are assuming that all the events are having the equal probability of happening. But in the expected value decision, we are saying that you know what is the probability of any event. So instead of taking equal probability for all the events, we are taking varied probability for the different events, but the sum of the probabilities must be equal. So here you are take the decision under the situation of risk, and you once you make the decision in that scenario, management would choose in such a which alternative where expected value is minimum, or the benefit which you are gaining is the maximum. So that was the step of the decision making under risk. Moving on in the topic, we will see decision trees. As you can see, decision trees is a schematic model of alternatives available to the decision maker along with their possible consequences. It means that it is a diagram which is depicting the different alternatives which a manager can have, and in this diagram you are making easier for the decision maker to calculate the payoffs of the each event, and based on those calculation we try to make our decision. If you see in the next slide, a decision tree is just like this, as you are seeing in the slide, and its name is given because the number of because its shape is similar with the tree. So in this decision tree model, you are supposed to know about the two main components of this tree. While reading or while making decision, you will start from your left side as you are seeing cursor in the video, and you will move towards your right side. In the decision model tree, there are two main things. First one is called the decision node, and that decision node is represented with a square node, and the other one is called the event node, and that event node is shown in a form of circle. The another important point in the decision tree model is after every decision node there will be a branches, and that branches will show different alternatives. As you can see in this slide, after first decision you have two alternatives, alternative 1 and alternative 2, and if you are taking the alternative 1, this alternative 1 will have three kinds of events, and these events are represented by E1, E2 or E3, and these events are multiplied with the probability of every event. So P is the probability, E is the event 1. So here you will mention the probability of each event, and as you know, the sum of all the probabilities should be equal to 1. So you will see while making decision either alternative 1 has how many events and which event is giving you how much payoff. As you can see, this is payoff 1, payoff 2 and payoff 3. Similarly, if you talk about uh, second alternative, and second alternative is leading to the this event and event node, and this event will lead to the second possible decision, and then it will further lead to the alternate 3, alternate 4. So in this way, you are actually making a decision considering the payoff, and you will choose the payoff which is the highest payoff for your decision making. And decision tree model helps you to see all the alternatives in a pictorial uh, representation. So hopefully आप लोगों को ये concept समझ आया होगा. If you are not clear about anything, you can make a comment on the Google Classroom, or you may can consult with your co-teacher. That's all with the lecture 9, and by this chapter 1 and the appendix of the chapter 1 is over. See you on the next time.